Hello, pole family. Today we're going to be talking about some beginner mistakes that are fairly common and how to avoid them. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Now, I've been teaching pole since late 2019, so about 5 years now, and there are a few things that I just see repeated over and over in terms of common mistakes. So the first mistake really kind of encompasses a few things, but generally it can be summed up by bad form. So a really common example of this is when people are learning to invert. A lot of times you'll see something where they kind of like jump into it and they use the momentum to help get themselves up. But that's actually not what we want to do at first. We don't just want to get to the trick. We want to make sure we're doing everything we need to do to get safely to the trick. So we want to make sure we're engaging the right muscles. So when we invert, we want to make sure that we're crunching, lifting, and then going into that nice straddle/chopper position. I feel like social media has been really bad for this because you see all of these crazy advanced tricks and everyone wants to jump to the trick and they don't really care as much how they're getting to it, it seems. And when we start to take shortcuts is when we start to risk injury. So for that invert example, if you're jumping up and you don't have the strength to hold yourself in that position, you're gonna put strain on a lot of muscles that may not be ready for it yet. So that's why it's really important that you take the time to build solid foundations before just like rushing into a trick. So again, I'm summarizing this as bad form. It also encompasses rushing into tricks. Don't do that. The second most common mistake, and this is less of a mistake and more of like an easy aesthetic fix, but it just is pointing your toes. So at first when you're learning things, totally okay to do flexed feet, to not worry about the details as much. But if you are someone who, has a few pole classes under their belt, maybe they're working on climbing, then you really want to start to build those good habits as soon as you can. So like when we're climbing, very often people will tend to flex the feet, especially that foot on the back of the pole. It's going to want to sickle. So what you want to do instead is really just force yourself to point. And you can do certain stretches and exercises for this. If you just Google search like exercises to improve your point, pretty common in many forms of dance. So would highly recommend doing that. And again, just like a small thing. So again, with this one, it's really more aesthetic, but if you are interested in, improving the visuals of your performance, then a lot of times just pointing your foot, or if it's a flex and it's, an intentional choice, just being intentional with what you're doing with your feet can really make all of the difference. This next one I am an absolute stickler about, and I think it's more common now, but it's essentially just to train both sides. I feel like it's almost a joke in pole where everyone, kind of trains both sides, wink, wink, nod, nod, and only trains their good side. But you really don't want to do that. Training things on only one side of the body can lead to muscle imbalances, which can cause injury down the road. Another reason to train both sides is sometimes you're working on a combo or you're doing something and you'll find yourself on the opposite side. And if you've trained those sides, then it's not an issue. But if it's like, your second time trying your inside leg hang on your left ever, then it's going to be a lot more challenging. It's really important that you start this from the beginning because as you get, more advanced and more skilled, it's going to become a lot harder to train things on both sides if you don't have foundations on both sides. So as soon as you get something on one side, whether it's your first fireman spin, your first leg hang, just make sure to start working the other side as well. They don't always need to be perfectly matched, but we want to make sure that we're at least training each side. And the last mistake I see is probably overusing grip aid. I remember at one of the studios I started at, there was this girl and she would apply dry hands all over the pole. So the pole would just be like coated in white. And what I found was that when I went on that pole after her, you would just stick. It was almost uncomfortable. But I also felt like I didn't need to really train my grip as much, whether that was my hand grip or leg grip or something else, because there was just so much grip aid. And the thing about grip aid is that it's supposed to help you. It's not supposed to replace training your grip strength. So when you're starting out, I mean, for your first few pull classes, I would honestly recommend just not using any. You probably don't really need it. Then after those first few classes, if you feel like, your skin is just super slippery against the pole, some grip aid, can really be beneficial, but just use a small amount. Remember that you can always add more. It can be fairly hard to remove, especially in the middle of a class though, depending on what grip aid you're using. So, if it's dry hand, start with the pea-sized amount, rub it in, try a few things, wait, and then if you need more, maybe add a little bit more. But, always only apply it to yourself. Never apply it directly to the poles. Too much grip aid can damage the poles. It can also damage your skin. It can make it permanently dry or just itchy or uncomfortable. So yes, just be mindful of your grip aid usage at first. Really try not to overdo it. And those are probably the biggest beginner mistakes that I see. Would love to know if you have seen others or if there are others that you're guilty of. I know that I was definitely guilty of a lot of these when I first started, 9 years ago now. I hope you found this helpful. I hope, there's a piece of information in it that will help make your pole journey just a little bit smoother. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.